So where were you before Frere-Jones?
Before Frere-Jones, I was actually in Holland, where I did the type media master at a point where I know some people were like, why is she going back to school now? And the thing is, I always like kind of dreamed of doing that, and I just didn't have a chance to do it earlier. And I had been, like before that, I was in Switzerland. I'm originally Swiss, and I was like freelancing and always taking on too much work and always undercharging for it and getting terribly burned out. And then I was like, okay, I need to do something different, and I also need to figure out how to actually get into type. And
so you were doing graphic design before that? You're
freelancing? Yeah. I actually studied in Germany. I studied multimedia VR design. And I really wanted to be a graphic designer, but the ugly truth is I didn't get into communication design because they had like a higher point average that you had to get in the entry exam. And they were like, you didn't make this one, but you could do your other preference, which is the computer stuff. And I'm like, I'll do the computer stuff. But I wanted to be a web designer originally. And then I kind of gravitated over to more print stuff and books and deeper into typography. And then did a part-time class in Zurich that was Introduction to Type Design, and that's when I knew that this was
the light went on.
Dig into, yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? How did you end up in like doing type?
Well, I was actually a music major undergrad of nonprofit management. Did that for a couple years, and then started hiring out the posters and that sort of thing to designers, and really wishing I was doing it. So I started teaching myself design. Got a graphic design job, and then decided I wanted to get a master's degree. So I went to Scotland and got my master's in graphic design from Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art and Design in Dundee, Scotland, but I lived in Edinburgh. It was, but I wasn't loving my program. It was right at the beginning, and I had just taken this class by Juliette Shen in Seattle, typography at SVC, and loved it. And so I toyed with the idea of trying to sneak into the type design master's program at Reading, but it just didn't work out logistically. She got me an interview with Jerry, and I just couldn't. I'd have to drop my master's program to go. And so, in hindsight, of course, I didn't realize how much I would love type and should have pulled it off, but I wish I could have done that. So anyway, I came back, and at the time I was teaching part-time at Seattle Pacific University, and they gave me typography courses to teach, intro and advanced, and I was like, oh yeah, I know type. And I started like really, going to conferences and getting into it, and I had no idea that there was this whole field and how little I knew about type. And so that's when I made my first font, Bemis, and I made my first font with my class. We all learned together, They critiqued me, and I finally released it, and then just ever since then. That was, over 10 years ago, so,
awesome.
Yeah. So tell me what you're working on lately.
It's been a great mix. It's been a really interesting mix of like, we've had some custom projects, we've had, retail things that are continuing. Just now what went up is we did a customization of Empirica, which I co-designed with Tobias Frere-Jones, for the Grand Central, this extension of Grand Central Station, where they're bringing Long Island Railroad trains in, and they're like putting this extension, and they were like, can you make a version of Empirica that looks good with Helvetica? And it turns out that it worked really well. It's like weird to see it in like completely different proportions, I didn't think it would work, and then you see it, and it's actually like that moment where something you made sort of shows you that it can do a thing that you didn't expect it to do. I kind of love those moments because it's like the work taking on a life of its own, where it like exceeds sort of the idea that you had for it. How about you? What's new?
So I just released this font of 8 years a few months ago, and it was just kind of chipping away at it forever, and it was a big moment. So I got my 8-weight family out, Mr. Gabe.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thank you. So I've been working on some Microsoft fonts for the last 6 months. So that's been really fun.
Is it new designs or like existing things that you're like?
It's looking at a lot of like hundreds of existing fonts and critiquing them and, pass-fail fonts, and then the ones that pass, I've been adding characters and making fixes and stuff. So
oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun actually, because I've looked at like 300 fonts in the last 6 months, and it's always interesting to crack somebody else's font open and see how someone else works. And
totally.
Yeah.
I found it really nice, like for a change, especially during the lockdown, to like work on something that's not, like here's a font that designers can license, but like this is a thing that like all these people will have access to, even people that aren't designers. And that's kind of an interesting change of like perspective, I thought. I was actually going to ask you where the idea came from for the project that you just finished.
Oh, Roger Black kindly gave me this mentorship with David Jonathan Ross 8 years ago at 9 something. And I think it was at the Amsterdam A-Type-I or something. And so he just said I could work on any project I wanted and they would mentor me for a year. So yeah, and David was great. And I just chose a lot of the characteristics that were kind of my favorite things in a font because I wanted to. And I kind of gave myself a more challenging project than I realized because I didn't know enough to know that like these curves were going to be kind of complex and how they fit together was tricky. So I chose high contrast, low waist, display, serif, and ligature steady because I wanted to do some big swoopy curves. And so it started out just doing regular, and then I was like, I may as well do an italic, and I was like, I may as well do bolds, and then I had an 8-weight family. So that's why it just kept taking longer. And some years I would just go on my fontcation, I always called it, go away from home for a week, once or twice a year and work on my font. And that's the only way sometimes I ever got anything done. I got a lot of critiques along the way, and I'm grateful. I was invested in by a lot of people in this type community. Some good people out there, so yeah,
it really is.
I learned a lot.
Good community, isn't it? Like I've just been thinking about it now, just like seeing people again that I wasn't even realizing how much I miss everybody. Yeah. And just being surrounded by this supportive
type family.
Yeah, it really is. It really is beautiful. Isn't that amazing that it's so deep and it feels like the deeper you go, you realize it goes even deeper or broader or both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just having this conversation with a couple type designers here about, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And so I keep feeling like more junior and more junior, but I am gaining some knowledge.
That is actually also what I love about teaching, though. I feel like I learn so much from my students. Sometimes they come at the questions from a completely different angle, and I feel like I'm so kind of stuck in the way, not stuck in, but I'm like used to the way I do things. Then they're like, but I was thinking about this and whatever, and my inspiration was that, and I was like, whoa. And I'd be like, just, it's so refreshing and it's so instructive, really, to learn from people that come from other perspectives. I always feel a bit awkward about being like a Swiss type designer because it's like we're so overrepresented, and like people always think like Swiss design is like that's how you. Swiss design has had such an outsized impact, especially in education, especially in the US, which I didn't know before I came here. And I just hope that I can also help a little bit inspire people who are not Swiss or maybe not white or maybe not even American or whatever, like to get into this, and because I think the more voices we have, the better.
So where are you teaching?
I teach at Yale. When I joined Tobias at his office, I also was able to, because he's been teaching at Yale for 20 years or something. And it's an elective introduction to type design, basically. And they wanted to put it on in the other semester, and he said he couldn't teach 2 semesters, and then so I kind of took over the other one. And I've mostly taken over the concept and the sort of schedule that was already there from him, and now I'm kind of trying to vary a few things and seeing what works. It's a very privileged and wonderful situation to be teaching in, because it's an elective in the Yale graphic design program. It means I, by definition, get the self-selected, hyper-motivated group.
Yeah, that really they're there to learn.
Yeah, they're really into it, and some people even want to take it more than once, and then they get really into it, and it's awesome. It's like they're great students. Yeah. You've been teaching for a while.
I've been teaching, most recently the last 4 years at Western Washington University. Mm-hmm. Up in Bellingham, Washington, and then before that, Cornish College of the Arts for a couple of years, and before that, Seattle Pacific University. So, so it's a big step to go out of it, but just want to get my hands on some type.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that it can be hard to get that balance right.
Yeah, and just to have a whole day set aside to just get in your groove.
Yes.
There's something about that being focused that's I like variety, but then having a big enough amount of time to really focus and get into it is important.
I feel that a lot, and I feel like especially with type, you really kind of have to get into it, right?
Yeah, and especially my project that took me so many years, and I would go several months without even looking at it and trying to like remember why I made decisions. Like the next one's going to be so much easier, quicker and quicker.
But that's so difficult, right? I think about that often in terms of process, because like you have all these kind of conceptual ideas and these thoughts about how you're going to solve something, and that doesn't really get recorded. What gets recorded is like the sort of how that breaks down into the actual shapes.
Yeah.
And then when you come back to it later, you kind of have to reconstruct what that was. And I haven't, like sometimes I always think I should like keep a log or something or write that down somewhere, and I just haven't. That also seems cumbersome, but it's weird because it's like it sometimes feels like the thing that you're actually thinking about is not directly, you know what I mean? Like.
So I kept a log with dates and version numbers and everything, which was helpful if I decided to go back to like the original design of my letter A or something, and I could go figure it out. But who wants to read a log? Like I really hardly ever look back at it, but it was there, and I tried to record some of those creative decisions that I made so I would remember what it was. But after that many years, it was so long, and you're right, a lot of that is like organic processes in your head that it's hard to dictate or remember. You can't write down everything.
No.
So I don't know. I don't know if I would do it again that way, but I think most projects are probably shorter, right? The next one I design is going to be a lot less time than that and a shorter project, and then I think I'll remember. But
I don't know. I feel like, ideally it would be a more coherent process, right? I feel like I have a few things that like I sketched out at some point and I really liked, but I didn't have like a use for them at that point, or I didn't have time or whatever. And now they're lying around that they're like an alphabet or like half an alphabet. And I'm like, I want to get back to this, but I have no idea what I meant when I made this. Why did I make this R? Like, why is it doing this? I don't know.
You must have had a great reason for it.
But it's also nice because you get to like just revise your own. Like you just draw a new R if it doesn't make sense, right? It also gives you that sense of distance.
And sleeping on it, never know what it's going to look like the next day, right?
Right.
It's important too.
Right.
Well, it was super fun to chat with you. I'm glad we could catch up.
Absolutely.